Hey everyone, this is another guide that's going to be based around Turbo and Hotwire. That's a framework within Rails, and it's a nice one because you can do things in real time and it's quite simple to implement in some regards. There are things that kind of get tricky with it, but I wanted to show you a simple liking mechanism that is real time. So over here on the right, I used a theme for my Rails UI project just to show you by example to scaffold up some UI, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second. But the general idea is, hey, there's a few posts here you can like. It's in real time, no real page refresh going on, which is the great part. It's all relative to the current user. So Rails UI actually comes bundled with Devise, so that's already set up. So in this guide, we'll go for basically very minimal configuration, but I want to show you a reusable way to make likes something you could append to another model that you have. For instance, in this case, I have posts, but you could like comments, you can like articles, anything like that. So it's considered a polymorphic association. So I'll show you that in this video. So here we go. All right, to kick things off, I want to let you know that I'm using Rails UI for this, and that's my other side project. So that is at railsui.com. Go check that out if you want to learn more. I've done other videos on this, and I don't mean to, always cross promote things, but that's just one area where it's honestly saving me time to do stuff. So it's found, that's pretty much why I built it, to save more time. So let's get started. I'm going to kick off a new app. I called this demo one Likes Hotwire, but I'm going to call the current one Hotwire Likes. So to use Rails UI, I really recommend just doing a vanilla Rails app. If you go and install any types of CSS or JS using the flagging features that you can run when you run a new app, it kind of does throw wrenches in the works right now for how Rails UI appends to a new app. So that's something to keep in mind. So I'll say Rails new, and we'll say, let's see, Hotwire Like, and just a brand new spanking Rails app, nothing under the hood really, to add to that mix. And then after the fact, we'll add Rails UI from the bundle instance. If you go to GitHub, this is already live and active. You could add this into your app pretty easily if you just add it to your gem file. I'll do it from bundle actually to show you another version of how you could do that. So I'll CD into Hotwire Likes and move up so I can show you. I'll add it via bundle. So I'll say bundle add Rails UI, and then you can actually pass a flag that says GitHub if it's on GitHub, and it needs to be a public repository. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Get Rails UI, and then Rails UI is the actual repo. And then I will pass the branch main just to be explicit, and that will go and fetch that from the repo, pull it down into your gem file, and add any dependencies. I did add these back. I think I don't know if I said it on the channel at all, but I thought I removed those dependencies, but it turns out we need those for production. There's a asset precompilation step that's kind of necessary. When you add it via bundler, it looks like this. It's a little old school. That's okay though. If you wanted to just kind of update that to move to the new syntax, you totally can. I will just for fun. And branch main, I think should work. So I'll go ahead and do a bundle there and see if there's any issues. No, we're good. Great. So with Rails UI, there is one more additional step to actually install it. Typically there's a generator or installer step on some gems. So that's kind of what's going on. So I'll say Rails UI install, and that will go fetch dependencies, change things around in your app, dependencies that could be a Tailwind or Bootstrap, and then setting it up for ES build at this point. Yeah, at the time of this recording, actually Rails 7.1 dropped. That's a alpha, so I still need to update. This app isn't using that at the moment, but it's not a big deal to use in this typical example, but that's essentially it. So I wanted to just show you when you boot up the app at this point, you'll have Rails UI ready to rock and roll. I'll go to localhost, and you come up to this page. And if you want to install more stuff, you totally can. What I'm going to do, at least to start, is add Tailwind as our default. I don't have more than 2 themes at this point, one on Bootstrap, one on Tailwind. So I'm just going to choose this one. It doesn't mean anything other than you might get that color as your defaults and stuff like that. That's just one thing to take into consideration. After you install a theme, though, you can add other pages and whatnot. We won't need it for this guide, but I wanted to just set up the app really quick so that when I scaffold stuff coming up in the next step, it's already pre-designed, essentially. You won't have to do anything else. So as you can see, there's a bunch of pages here for this particular theme. I'm going to ignore that now. You can go check those out if you want to add those. But the real stuff under the hood is the design system that I want. So this stuff is going to kind of take care of scaffolds and whatnot. So when we run generators, they'll look like this out of the gate, and that saves you loads of time, which is the whole point of using it in this video. So with that out of the way, the bulk of that junk is done, which is great. It only took a few commands, no actually, editing any code really. And then at this point, we're going to set up a model. One thing to note, I think I already did, is that the user model already exists when you run that Rails UI install generator. So that is something that's taken care of. Devise is what I chose for that authentication solution. So it's something to keep in mind. So we won't need to actually generate users, but we are going to reference the user in this guide. So I wanted to just mention that out of the gate. With this started, we can do a first generator where I'm going to actually scaffold the post model. So I'll just say Rails generate scaffold, and I'll call it post. And we're just going to give it a title of a string and then also content of text. Very simple, easy. Done this like 100 times on my videos probably. As you notice, it scaffolds out our routes. It does invoke it via Rails UI. So the gem's kind of taking over there, and we have custom stuff relative to the theme you built or you chose and all that other stuff under the hood. Okay, the next one I'm going to generate, we won't migrate it or anything yet, is a model called like, and it's going to be polymorphic association. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to generate the model for this one, and it will be a model like, and we'll make it reference users since we already have that model, like I said, and then likable references, which is the polymorphic association we're creating. And we'll actually denote that with this syntax. So this tells Rails to generate a unique association based on the polymorphic principles. That basically is, in layman's terms, that means any like that you have or you want to associate a likable thing to, you can. You don't have to just append it to a brand new model each time, like say post like or comment like. That would be a new model that you would have to create manually. And in this case, you can just reuse the like model in this instance, assuming you have a reference to the user and also a likable ID and the type of post. So it's a mouthful, but it'll make more sense in a minute. So let me run that. That creates just our model under the hood, which is the like, and then the migrate or migration file. So let's go check that out just so you can see what I mean. If you go into our DB folder, we have a migrate file, and we've got this one we just created for the post table, and the likes is going to be this. So it's got this references likable attribute, and that's going to just kind of do all the magic under the hood to give us what we need to do those associations. So there are additional steps we'll need to do for the models. So let's go ahead and assume run our migration just to get that done. There we go. So that created those. And if you go into your schema now, you can kind of see what really that looks like. Even though this is domain specific language, it still gives you an idea that likes has the reference of user ID there. That generator knows to call likable a type and then actually have a likable ID as well. And then it throws an index on that for speed and lookups and stuff. So same with the user. And then posts, just simple title content, and we get our date time stamps for free. Users is already there. I already added active action text and active storage too, so that comes with Rails UI. Okay, simple, I guess. That's kind of complicated, but simple in use. So when you add that like model, this is already, since we did that generator, it already appended that stuff to the like model, which is fantastic. That's what we want. And then on the user model is where we'll need to actually append something. So what I want to do is say has many likes, And we'll say dependent destroy, because if a user is destroyed, we'll destroy their likes too. So that just looks like so. Awesome. And then on the post model is where we'll need to do a little logic too. So we'll say has many likes. This is where we're appending the likes to something as likable. And then we could also say dependent destroy. There we go. And just like this line you could add to pretty much any other model that you want to have likes on and associated with. So that's kind of nice. You will need, of course, your user reference, which is fine. And then the likable concept will still need to belong to maybe that model, but you're able to set that up pretty quickly and swiftly without needing to create brand new models and controllers and all that junk that gets repetitive. Okay. With that in place, our app obviously loads the Rails UI stuff by default. We can change that. So we'll go to our routes, and I'm going to comment this one out and then come back down here and make this posts index. Okay, cool. And I need to work on my spelling as usual. All right, so why don't we go into our post controller. We've got that scaffolded, so it's going to be basic CRUD operations going on here. That's relatively straight up with HTML. So when you create a new post, you're going to just, test post, my test post content. It's going to just go ahead and create it. One little gotcha with this is the Rails UI thing. If you're already running the server, you might need to reboot it once, and then the Tailwind changes should take into effect and you'll see the actual updated UI. Need to figure that out. But there we go. We've got a basic post here. No liking mechanism yet, but we've got our scaffold in place. The index is here. You want to view the post, you can go click this button and there's the show page. You can see the ID of it as well. Cool. And then if you want to, it might be good to just sign up, because we're going to reference this to a user. So we'll say John Doe at example.com. There we go. Okay, so now I'm signed in, and I use little dog avatars just as a placeholder until you add your own avatar, but just a little gotcha there. And then let's add the controller logic for what we're going to be striving toward, and then we'll go implement the routing and everything else that we'll need along the way. So one key thing I want to do, we already have our set posts before action. Besides the index and show, I want to make people log in to edit a post. And I'm not going to build out all the authentication logic, so like relative to the current user, who should edit, who shouldn't, all those things. I'm just going to show you that it can be gated, and you can go from there, because I've done that in other videos, I believe. Let's see, index, do I have the right syntax there? Except, I forgot the I, there we go. So now with that will require a sign in. So we can go back to maybe a private window, go back here, and obviously I can see the post. I can't click edit though, it's going to require me to sign in. A real world app, you wouldn't even see that button, but I'm not going to go to all that trouble. So just so you know, that's required there. And in the controller, I'm going to actually add two new actions that's going to be for the like and unlike constructs. So we'll say def like and def unlike. So these will have very similar logic, only we'll destroy an action for one and then create one for another. So for the post, we could say post.find params. So that's the typical thing that's happening under set posts. So if you really wanted to, you can come up here and just extend this to like and unlike. So that just happens by default now. That's that much code you don't have to write. Now you get the instance of posts automatically. So you could just say, in this case, current user likes.create, and then we'll pass in the likable will be the post. So that will automatically assign the posts to the current like relative to the user, if that makes sense. All that in just a few characters. It was pretty wild. Okay, I'll come back to the next line that I'm going to add, but I'm going to just do the same here. We're going to go about this a little bit differently. Instead of likes create, we're going to go current user find likes, find by likable post, and then we'll pass destroy right on top of that. We'll actually delete the like. And then here you can go crazy with Turbo. Render the full response cycle like you see up here. Respond to, have fallbacks, whatever. A cool thing that I found is you can actually just render a partial here. And if you think on the selling point of Turbo is basically HTML over the wire. So we're literally responding with HTML instead of like JSON or something like that in terms of being a Turbo response. The catch here is it's going to expect there to be a turbo frame tag tied to this. So I'll show you in the views coming up why this is necessary, but I'm just going to render our post partial. When you generated your post scaffold, there's going to be a post singular partial there. That's going to render from the collection. So I'll look at the index here. This is all set up. This is what we're looking at the moment. It's going to render posts.each and just renders the instance of post. And this will automatically render that partial just based on naming conventions. It does the same thing on the show view as well. If you just render that, I'll show you what I change here coming up, but I want to just mention that so you know where we're getting this logic. And then we do need to pass the instance of post through on this partial. So we'll say locals and open a hash there and say post. And honestly, we'll do the same for unlike. And the whole point of that, rendering the HTML over the wires so you can update the view in real time. So it gives the view something to update in that turbo frame tag quickly instead of having to refresh the page and just re-render it all with traditional HTML like you would on a traditional like destroy action here or update action, etc. You could go change this to all turbo if you want. I won't do that in this guide, but I just wanted to mention it. Now this is only if you don't want to render any kind of streaming, so keep that in mind too. If you did want to render turbo stream, you could respond to with a turbo stream format, something like this. And you could either pass inline logic like that or go and create a file called like.turbo stream underscored like that and then .erb and do the logic in there. If it gets crazy, I recommend going and creating a file. If not, then you could do it inline. It is whatever you want it to be. Wanted to mention that too. So now we've got these new endpoints, but we need to add some routing for those. So what I'll do is, if you notice, the scaffold added the resources bit at the very top. I'm going to make a block and then do a member do block. And this will allow us to pass the ID of the post through to the URL automatically. And I'll just do a post response for like, and that's going to route to posts like. We can get very granular there. And then dislike will be, or unlike will be delete action. So it's going to be that type of response. Unlike, and then we'll do unlike as well. Great. So if you want to check out routes, there's a couple places, the traditional localhost, Rails, info routes. And you could go find like, there you go, or go to Rails UI routes, and you could do like as well. And there we go, we've got two there. A little more UI here, but that gives you a visual. I added that to the mix there for my own sanity because this looks like trash personally, I think. Anywho, okay, so our routes are in place. We'll need to create some dummy content now. I've got this here, great, but it might make sense to add maybe another one. Let's do another quick post. Great. Back to posts. We've got a couple here. Awesome. Let's go add liking functionality to the view next. So this will be where we enhance that post partial. Right now we have just this and it works fine, but I want to actually enhance it to include the key thing we'll need, which is the turbo frame tag. that wraps the whole thing. And I'll pass this shorthand DOM ID post. We actually just use post there. And in the block at the very end. And this just basically says, I think it's post 1. So it's just relative to what ID the post is. So it's unique. And that allows us to be very quickly like find that post and update it real quick with this partial. It's just kind of how the response cycle works with Turbo. Okay, so one thing I want to do is extend this a touch. So we've got post content below the time. We'll add a P class and say, I'm going to do pluralize post.likes.count. You could say size here too, maybe for less of a hit to your database. All right, that should just tell us, oh, there's 0 likes. Good to know. And we'll probably want to add this just so you can log out and the app doesn't break. So we'll say user signed in. It's part of Devise. You could do an else statement. I'm making this very primitive. I mean, the UI, obviously I scaffolded out and to show something better than the defaults. But I wanted to just show that you can like with very plain logic here. So we're going to check if the current user and then the post likes actually exist. So if there are likes, we can pass the user ID of the current user there. Basically, if they liked it, we'll show something. If not, we'll do something else. So we'll render a button too. And this is essentially a small form that's going to render. And this will be if they liked it. So they're going to be shown an unlike path. So we'll say unlike post path, and we'll pass the post through. And then we need to make sure it's a delete response. Remember the route we added. And then we could just say, I'll differentiate the color here and say text rows 600. And then otherwise we're going to say like. Pretty simple there, right? So like post path. I'll just give this an underline. And else, this big else down here will link to, it's going to look like the like function, but it's just kind of a ploy to get you to log in. So new user session path. Again, that comes from Devise. Underline. And then the key thing here, since this is in a turbo frame tag, we need to kind of allow the link to actually go somewhere. Otherwise this would render some like no content. It would try to go render that page here. So you need to address that. And you could do that in this way. Pass a data attribute. And then you could say turbo frame. And then underscore top. That kind of just means take me out to the new page and don't actually try to render it within this one. All right. So let's see if our logic is complete, and then we'll go and try this out. I think we're good. So because this turbo frame tag exists, we're rendering it in our index path here. So this allows me to like both on the index, of course, and the show view relative to that same partial, if that makes sense. And the whole thing's wrapped in the turbo frame tag, and it has a unique ID. So if you look under the hood, we've got a turbo frame post 1, and then below that a turbo frame within this tag turbo frame post underscore 2. So those are unique, and that's important for turbo to work. So if we were to go click like, we get like immediately. Another like. Great. So I'm going to go into a new private window, and you could see that you could do it with another user and that the likes increment. I'm going to sign up as just another one. Cool. So this is a different account called Jane Doe. 2 likes there and then like there. Now, one thing I don't have set up is streaming, and that is something you could extend this with. So when you like on this page, it would update over here. That uses WebSockets, and it's an additional thing we'd have to add. I don't find it super crucial for liking, but to each his own. That is essentially it. I wanted to mention the streaming part as the last bit of a way to enhance it. But other than that, I hope that was helpful and shows you the real power of, there's no page refresh with this, and Turbo just really makes interactive things kind of come to life with relatively no code at all, no JavaScript. It's all just under the hood and built in, and I love it. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.